I'm happy to be here to address you on the theme Empowered Women Retelling the Story of Jesus, Strengthened by the Wisdom of St.Anne. The empowerment of women is not just a social ideal, it is a transformative force that reshapes families, communities, and entire nations. At its heart, it's about enabling women to make choices and act on them freely, whether in education, employment, leadership, or personal life. But it's also about dismantling the barriers, cultural, economic, legal, that have historically limited those choices. As we consider this theme in the context of renewal of St.Anne's congregation, this theme is vital and significant because as a women congregation, a women religious congregation in the Catholic Church, it's always opportune to reflect on the various nuances and aspects of the theme, Empower Women, retelling the story of Jesus. First of all, we need to consider the question, how can we become empowered women? Then only we may be able to empower anybody else. That too, as a religious, how can I personally, each one of us can become empowered, especially from the perspective of retelling the story of Jesus. Empowerment isn't a one size fits all concept. For some, it means access to education or financial independence. For others, it's the freedom to speak, lead, or simply be safe. It's deeply contextual, shaped by geography, tradition, and opportunity, but universally vital. Thus, when we consider the theme, Empowered Women Retelling the Story of Jesus Strengthened by the Wisdom of St. Anne, we must consider a few aspects. First of all, what are the areas in need of empowerment? That implies identifying areas of vulnerability and marginalization that women all over the world, especially in India, are subjected to. Only when you and I identify the areas of marginalization, we start the project of empowerment. Some of them are. For example, if you give this question into the chat GPT, you get certain answers. Which are the areas there is actually, probably we can say, lack of empowerment, especially for women, education, employment, health and nutrition, political representation, safety and violence, cultural and social norms. Now, if you narrow down your search further, areas where women empowerment is a must in the church, answer would be like this: leadership and decision making, theological education and training, preaching and teaching, addressing gender bias and cultural norms. Naturally, these are areas where women suffer marginalization, sidelining, especially by the mainstream societal influences. Here we need to also think of another area. Sometimes, when we take India, for example, we have many cities, big towns, but a huge part of India is practically village. Maybe we can say. So the city-village divide is also to be considered when we consider empowered women. For example, in big cities like Bangalore or Bombay or Mumbai, we may see the women, youngsters especially, highly emancipated and empowered. They can move around freely, they get a good working chances, employment chances, etc. But that's not the case in the rural setup. When we go to the rural setup of India, things are quite different, as we all know. Naturally, when we speak of empowered women and empowering women, this aspect also is to be taken into account. What's powerful is that when women are empowered, the ripple effects are undeniable. Children are healthier, economies grow, and societies become more just. As recently somebody commented, empowerment is the process and freedom is the goal. So this can be also applicable in our own context. Now the next question we need to consider when we speak of empowerment, especially empowered religious women to retell the story of Jesus, we may have to start discussing or thinking. When we speak about empowerment, first of all, empowered by whom? Or empowered by what? Or empowered for what? Or how do we get empowered? These are some of the questions we need to think, especially from our context as we discuss this theme. First and foremost, for us, we need to be empowered by the person of Jesus and his message. Then only we may be able to retell the story of Jesus to others, empowered by Jesus and his message. Then empowered by what? What are the principles? What are the ideals with which we need to be empowered? That also is important, because there are so many areas possible where we can trust or we can rely for empowerment. But if our ideal is wrong, then the empowerment also would be going in a erratic way. So naturally we need to clarify the ideals or the values on which we may focus for this empowerment. And then how do we get empowered? For that one is also actually we need to consider areas. For example, in women religious congregation, the formative setup, do we offer sufficient space and possibilities for the youngsters to get empowered? Good education, and then probably giving them opportunity to get empowered. Otherwise, we can discuss about themes like this, but nothing may happen concretely. So it's very significant to consider these questions. First of all, we speak about, actually we may be having so many meditations, that thing, this thing, spiritual exercises. Ultimately, do we get empowered by the person of Jesus? And for that one, we need to know Jesus. Knowing Jesus now is possible only by, of course, prayer can help, but together with the prayer, we need also have good training, theological education, theological deepening, etc. is also a must for that one. Naturally, it is good to consider from the perspective of themes like this. Do we create sufficient opportunities in our own religious situations, in our own communities, to get empowered, so that we may be able to retell the story of Jesus as empowered sisters of St.Anne's. Now, when we speak about actually the notion story of Jesus, it can be also misunderstood. When we say story can be simply and we can say unrealistic thing. However, when we speak of story of Jesus, it's actually, we can say, a caption we use to maybe we can say to comprehend the mission, life and message of Jesus. So I would say when we use the term story of Jesus, the reference is to the story of Word incarnate, person who lived 33 years, of that even 30 probably his own private life and 3 public life. Through that one, who made an impact, first of all, on his contemporaries, and through them, the contemporaries later, after experiencing Jesus, like the apostles, the evangelists, they retold the story of Jesus in the form of gospels. Practically, the 4 gospels, Gospel of Mark, Gospel of Matthew, then Luke and John, there are 4 various narratives about their experience of the person of Jesus, which they shared with others. And then from that one, we have that retold story of Jesus in the form of 4 Gospels. And these Gospels, together with the other New Testament letters, so-called we call the New Testament, all of them practically can be understood as actually the retold story of the retold life of Jesus in the form of various narratives to various contexts, etc. Jesus influenced many lives, cultures, and his life and teaching have been transformational. So when we consider the idea of story of Jesus, the life, the mission, and also the message of Jesus was transformational, and that transformational impact on the disciples after the Pentecost would become witness. They shared that experience with others, and finally that would become transformational. That transformational effect is a formation of the early Christian communities, Pentecostal sharing, and after that one, they traveled to various parts of the world, starting from Jerusalem, then St. Paul, Asia Minor area, and St. Thomas coming even up to India. They shared their experience of the person of Jesus in the form of a storytelling, and from that one, that story influenced so many people, become transformational. Many converted into Christianity and formed the early Christian communities. So that process of retelling the story of Jesus still remain as a possibility. That's why the church would say, like Pope Francis and even Pope Leo said, to be a Christian means to be a missionary, in the sense of if we are actually a truly convinced Christian, we cannot but share our own experience of the person of Jesus in the form of sharing his story with others. Now, Jesus was a revolutionary in the way he uplifted the marginalized, especially among the group of marginalized, the women also should be included, because women were one of the marginalized of the society of the Jewish religion and the community of that time, highly patriarchal society. Naturally, the women were practically part of that one. He spoke to them, defended them, and revealed profound truth through their stories. To call out some examples, just some of them from the Gospels. Mary Magdalene, she was not just a disciple but also a messenger. She became the first witness to the resurrection of Jesus. Naturally, in selecting Mary Magdalene as the first witness, especially Gospel of John, that also highlights maybe how a marginalized person can be empowered so that the society recognizes the power of communication of a woman. For example, Jesus asked, the risen Lord asked Mary Magdalene to communicate this good news to his own apostles. Then only hearing to that one, Peter and John rushed to the tomb. That means actually the power of witnessing and communication. That is still that power of communication can be retraced. Then another one, St. John, again, the Samaritan woman, that a long dialogue between Samaritan woman and Jesus in John, Gospel of John chapter 4, where you see various stages through which Jesus would be leading this woman from, probably we can say, vulnerability and marginalization to empowerment. Jesus, step by step, would take this Samaritan woman from various type of marginalization or actually lack of empowerment she experienced. However, finally she would become highly empowered, having the courage to go to the village and share the experience with the villagers. And listening to her sharing, they came to meet Jesus. Again, another way of understanding the empowerment and empowering. Then we have also the anecdote of Martha and Mary, two friends of Jesus, usually appearing in Gospel of Luke especially. Both of them, they embody both the service and deep spiritual reflection, showing faith is lived in different ways. There too, Jesus recognizes uh, both of them, they played different roles. Mary was very active, preparing good food for Jesus, but Mary opted for other one, being hospitable by attending to the guest, by sitting near to him, listening to him, speaking to him, engaging the guest in another way. It's better not to find a fault with the merit of one or the other. The problem happened with Martha. Instead of she recognizing the positive role played by her sister Mary, by attending to the guest, by talking to him, she started complaining. Don't you see that my sister left me alone here to prepare everything, and she is simply enjoying talking to you? But then I think what is not actually very positively seen by Jesus is actually the complaining attitude of Martha. Martha did good, positive thing to prepare good food for the guest, but at the same time, engaging the guest also by talking, dialoguing with him is also a significant aspect of hospitality. So, in communities like ours, the religious congregation, we need to respect and we need to give, maybe we can say, due space to the talent of each person. Martha had one talent to prepare good food. That's good. Appreciate that one. And then Mary had another talent to engage with actually the guest in a different way. And in our religious communities also, all of us are differently talented. We may not be having all the same talent. All may not be having also all the talents. So for the success of a religious community, joyful, maybe we can say community exercise, etc., we need to give due space to the other. Let them have their own talent. We appreciate positive regard to the other is also very significant. That would create empowered people. Because if you don't appreciate the talent of one person and all the time finding fault with that person, naturally that person after some time would feel discouraged, and we lose a chance of empowering a person. When we speak big themes like empower women, etc., what we can do in our own communities to empower my own co-sister, maybe community member, would be the first priority. Then we can think of big empowerment through other dynamics. That's also significant, but small things can also work great miracles. If Jesus actively included women in his mission, then today it is women who are carrying forward that message, challenging injustice, leading communities, and shaping faith through action. Now, just a small reflection, then I stop. How can women become the agents of faith in contemporary realities? We are having actually 21st century, our time is not that simple. So many complex situations are there. Oppositions, contradictions, paradoxes, many things are there. So how in this present scenario of paradoxes, complexities of various sorts, how can we play a positive role, especially in an empowered situation? Three areas. One is social justice and human rights. Some may be able to engage in those areas. Then education and leadership. Healing and restoration is also an area where especially women religious are very much engaged in. Social justice and human rights. Women in faith spaces are standing at the front lines of activism. For example, I have seen many religious sisters after studying law, LLB, and etc. They take active role in providing social assistance to the vulnerable communities, especially the women, those who cannot afford to go to legal advice by paying a lot of money. Actually, we can help them in various places. We have some examples starting from Supreme Court and even various, there are many lawyers already maybe already there in the High Court and various other places. That can be also one mission, especially to help people to fight against human trafficking, advocating for refugees' rights, etc., for the migrants, and defending the oppressed. These are all areas where we can very well become maybe helpful if we get empowered. And even the youngsters now, drug abuse issues are there. It's also having a lot of issues with actually trafficking, etc. Especially sisters can help the young girls suffering from now actually entangled in drug, etc. can be an area. Then naturally you engage in education and leadership. From classrooms to maybe boardrooms, not merely classroom education, as consecrated empowered women, we can empower youngsters, especially if you identify young chaps, young boys and girls. You can identify their talents and then give them encouragement so that they would become great leaders in the future. For example, when I was a student, only one religious sister, she only identified my potential to write lyrics. She promoted me, started doing something, and finally that talent is got highly promoted. So you can promote the talents. And I have seen recently sisters, after studying counseling, etc., helping so many young girls and boys to come out of their maybe complicated family situations. Nowadays, the problems are on the increase in the schools, etc. They come with actual bag full of negative experiences. But if the sisters can identify that as an important ministry, especially in the educational ministry, it would be wonderful. We can get so many youngsters to come out of their own baggage of various negative influences in life. Then, of course, healing and restoration also another area, medical as well as spiritual, through counseling, family visits, etc. If you have time to listen to the trauma of people, especially you visit the families. Sometimes the women, they never get a chance to open up because they seldom get a chance to speak to somebody. So if you go and get their confidence and visit them, naturally that would be also an area where you can work as empowered women. And now, through all these ministries, what we do is actually retelling the story of Jesus in different ways. There is no need to go and tell directly all the gospel anecdotes. That may not work also. For example, if you are visiting only the Christians, Catholics, it may be easy. But in India, in the pluralistic context of India, we may have to take into account also others also, not only Christians, not only Catholics, even people from other religions in and around us. The school, for example, we may be having only a handful of Catholics. Rest are maybe from other religions. We need to pay attention to them also. In that way, indirectly also we can tell the story of Jesus by conveying the message, the positive message taught by Jesus in one way or other. Finally, when we consider this theme, faith is not a passive. Passive faith living is possible. We go sit normal schedule way of our timetable, finish the business. But it can become also very active, alive and embodied in daily struggles and victories. Empowered women, passively we pray. That is actually it has got a passive and active aspect, but we can empower others through our active engagement. Once empowered, then we may be able to empower many others. The story of Jesus in that way, as I mentioned in between, remains relevant, but how it is told must evolve. We have to evolve our own strategies. Maybe St.Anne's congregation needs to develop a strategy to address various issues which I mentioned in your own way. You cannot have actually a carpet type of understanding for everybody. For each context, you may have to have your own strategies developed, but based on, first of all, the charism of St.Anne's. Because when we speak of St.Anne, Anna and Joachim, both of them were actually the parents of Mother Mary. Their main ministry was educational. Mary was properly educated, and so that is why Mother Mary remained the best, actually the most empowered woman in the Bible. She was so empowered that she could address various challenges in diverse ways. Right from the moment of the Magnificat, that fiat, the way she took up the challenges of life is marvelous. Only an empowered person would be able to do that one. From where did Mary get this energy of empowerment? Naturally, the parents, especially the mother, should have played a role. We don't have any direct historical data for that one. However, from the various roles played by Mary, we can assume actually the parents, especially Anna, together with Joachim, played a very vital role in the proper upbringing of Mary as a very courageous woman. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for her to tell fiat. It would have been difficult for her to take up all those challenges in her life. So, to conclude our discussion, I would say, in the present era, where there is possibility for women to become more empowered and can also involve not only in the faith living, in the pastoral ministry, but also in the broader social reality, can influence people in one way or other. Enormous possibilities are there. And then retelling of Jesus' story isn't about changing history, it's about changing perspectives. Empowered women are not just followers, they are agents of transformation. Like Mother Mary, she was great agent of transformation from Old Testament to New Testament, from the old way to a new way, and then others who played significant role in transforming the society. They carry forward Christ's teaching not in words alone, but in movements, in struggles, in victories. We are having various models, a good study of the various great transformed and empowered women who influence the society positively to transform the society down through the centuries would be a great study. The women in India or women in various parts of the world. So today, as we reflect on faith, leadership, and empowerment, let's ask ourselves, are we simply listening to the story or are we living it? So ultimately, I would say, to become empowered women retelling the story of Jesus, strengthened by the wisdom of St.Anne, the first thing, get empowered by Jesus, his life, mission, and person, so that all of you can become agents of empowerment in the present context of complexities of all sorts. I wish all of you a good time. Thank you.